Right. So I'm Isaac. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the 350 Mass Spring Intern. Um, and yeah, we're here for the um, a little workshop on onboarding new members, all of that stuff. Um, so I thought first we can do a quick round of introductions. I think it would be helpful to hear just like very briefly where everyone is coming from, who you are, where you're coming from, and how long you've been involved with 350 Mass. Um, so like, yeah, I'll start. I'm Isaac. I'm based out of Somerville, um, and I have been with 350 Mass since January. Um, and maybe I'll pass it to Marissa, and then if we can just like popcorn it around.
Sure. I was actually just trying to go through my email to see if I could find the oldest the oldest one where I could, but I'm Marissa. I'm out at the 350 Mass Greater Franklin node, and I think it's been 4 years or close getting close. It'll be 4 years this fall. So oh, should I call on someone? Is that the plan? All right, Meadow, sorry.
Hi, I'm Meadow. I'm in the Boston area, and I'm pretty new. I've been part of 350 for about 6 months. Calling on somebody, Sarah.
Hello, my name is Sarah, and I'm with the Greater Lowell node. I live in downtown Lowell, and I've been with 350 for about 3 years. And let's see, Erica, you're gonna go next.
Hi, I'm Erica. I'm in Somerville, and this is my first 350 event.
Yay.
Morning.
I'm not sure that was me, but I'm assuming it was. I'm Mona Phillips. I'm out of the Fairhaven, New Bedford area. I am homeless. I have no node. However, I have attended a number of workshops, very excited about the Make Polluters Pay initiative. And I do a lot of tabling on climate related stuff in the South Coast area. And I was just at UMass last week, and I actually got 5 people to sign the support for the MPP. So I'm very excited. I am very interested in finding out how I get something started here. But in the meantime, I'm particularly interested in the legislation and doing what I personally can to testify, to support it, to promote it. That's it. Nina?
Hi, sorry, I'm gonna echo because I'm trying to switch to, let me close that. My computer has decided to run really hot, and so I'm gonna move to my phone. I was in the middle of moving to my phone, so my apologies. So I'm Nina Kammerer. I'm in the Waltham node, and I've been paying dues to 350 for some while now. But that doesn't mean I've been doing anything except every once in a while attending, annual meetings because they're held on the Brandeis campus and I teach there. But I stepping up at this point. There's a Waltham node that is becoming active, and I live in Waltham. So, Stephen.
Hi, I'm Steve Wenner. I'm with the South Shore node. I live in Cohasset. And how long have I been with 350? A long time. I forget it. Maybe I joined a year after 350 Mass became a thing. Better Future Project. Not sure. I'll pass it to Andy.
Well, I think you joined probably when it was about 350. If you get what I'm saying. Andy Platt, Acton, and I can't count. I think it's about 8 or 9 years or so. but I'll just do a postscript that I am very excited about this MPP super fund. I think we got this one by the tail and could be maybe the most important thing of all the good things that 350 has done. So I will pass it on to Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Riley. I'm in the Metro West node. I joined 11 years ago when the Metro West node was first constituted. And we've had, in the last year, we've had a number of new people. So I'm really anxious to learn about keeping them. And I'm going to call on Matt Webb.
Thank you. Matt Webb, I'm with the North Shore node in Haverhill, and I've been with 350 for a little over 8 years now. Paul, you're next to my screen.
Hi, Paul Shore, also Metro West node. I got involved with Youth Mass, I think right after Trump got elected the first time. I guess it was probably 2017. And I'll pass it to Martine.
All right, Martine from the Somerville Cambridge node. I think I joined about 1.5 years ago. I'm not quite sure. Time flies. I joined the legislative liaison team a few months ago, and that's it.
All right. Thank you guys for introducing. It's very awesome. Also, we have a wide spread of older and newer members. So yeah, this should be a good conversation. And I want to emphasize that, you know, us all being at different points means that we all have something very important to bring to this conversation. So yeah, just an invitation to step up and, you know, make your voice heard. So I'll talk a little bit about how this is going to go. So I'm going to give like a very brief presentation in a few minutes about just going over some outreach tactics that we covered in the last training, about tabling, just as a refresher. We won't go too much into it. And then we're going to hear from our three lovely guest speakers. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about their own personal histories within 350. And then we're going to transition into a larger group discussion about, yeah, just some broad points like new member roles, some barriers to engagement, and most importantly, some next steps. So yeah, and then we'll close. So that should be how it will go. And I'm going to share my screen for just a couple minutes. And we're going to talk about some outreach strategies first. Can y'all, is this coming through? Okay, so just to reiterate again, this might be old information, this might be new information, but just a few points on outreach strategies. The first point is that having an elevator pitch ready is super important. I know that people have been tabling already, but just again to reiterate, that first sentence that you're saying to someone is so important. The way that you're making that first point of contact, yeah, is what's gonna, you know, draw someone in. And then the way that you engage with people after that first point of contact, of course, also matters in terms of like, you know, using jargon and complicated language and stuff like that. Like people, not everyone knows what a super fund is. I know I didn't not that long ago. So just being aware of all, yeah, all of that jargon you're using. And then also making sure that you have a way to record their information. So like getting people to sign a petition is a great way to collect emails, collect names, all of that stuff, or just signing up for, you know, 350 is a great way. We have sign-up sheets. And the third step is talking to the people that you're reaching. Outreach is always done more effectively when it's done interpersonally. And so, yeah, I push time and time again, but having one-on-one conversations is so important when it comes to organizing. And that's like it's the most effective way that you're going to bring someone in. And so now I'll talk a little bit about some tactics that I like to use, some like little tools. A couple graphics. This first one is it's, I guess this version of it uses active opposition to active allies as the scale. So the idea being that there are people in each of these little orange slices, and the goal being to move people from the right over to the left, from being active opposition to active allies. I like this one because it has a few arrows. Notably, there's not an arrow between active opposition and passive opposition because we're not trying to reach climate deniers. They're not reachable. You know, maybe they'll have a change of heart sometime, but you know, that's not the people that we're trying to attract. We're trying to move people who are passively in opposition, who might be skeptical, but with a little pushing might be moved to the left. Folks who are neutral, we're trying to draw them to passive allies, meaning like, you know, bringing your friends to an action or something like that can make them a passive ally. And then the main point of this workshop is to figure out how we're bringing people from passive allies into an active role as an active ally to be organizing with us. So another helpful tool that I like to use is the target. So I know I've got these goofy little arms, but the point being that the leadership of an organization is like a circle, and it'll have rings. So the outside ring represents the member base, which is just, you know, all the people in our e-lists, everyone who we're blasting all these emails out to, people who we can bring to, you know, big rallies in Boston, like the Hands Off rally. You know, we can get like a big group of people to go, something like that. But then the inner ring inside that is more for active node leaders or active node members who will show up to node meetings every month and might do, you know, some tasks and stuff like that. But then the inner circle being node leaders. And so the goal, and then the arms I put in to represent, you know, grabbing new people. So we can grab from, I guess the arms should be coming from all of the rings, but the arms are intended to grab people for like when, you know, when you're tabling, you're extending that arm and trying to bring new people in, with the idea being, you know, first we bring them into the outer ring as the member base, but then this arrow is what we're looking at today. Okay, we got someone onto the e-list, we have someone's email, we have someone's phone number. How do we now engage them into becoming an active member and bring them to node meetings and have them, you know, come table with us and all that stuff. So yeah, that's just a brief spiel about outreach strategies, and we're not going to get too into it right now. We can touch on it a little bit in our conversation later, but just as a little reminder. And now I want to turn the floor over to our speakers, who I'm not sure what we decided on for who's going first. Marissa.
I think I said I volunteered to go first on this one. So just a sort of, I guess, a brief discussion of how I joined 350 Mass. So I did confirm, I'm pretty confident it was going to be 4 years this fall. So we're not quite there yet, but we're pretty close. So it was about it was fall of 2021. Obviously things looked a little bit different organizationally, you know, during that period of time, but I actually came across 350 at a sort of an outdoor like harvest festival that was being like held at a farm that I'd been getting like a lot of my produce from for a bit. And I don't remember if there was a petition on the table. I do know that I signed my name on a clipboard at some point, but I don't remember if they're actively promoting legislation at the time. I went to this event originally because it was like an outdoor activity that I could go to and like, listen to some music, and they had like some vendors, and as I was walking around the different stalls, you know, the 350 Mass table was there, and they were able to talk to me about, you know, that they're a climate organization and it is an issue that's always been important to me. So I was like, oh, this is a potential way to like get involved, and they're like in the same area as me. And at the time it was particularly easier barrier for entry because the meetings were virtual. So I could, you know, pop in from my apartment, and I didn't have to worry about like traveling to get someplace. So I don't know if I signed anything for legislative stuff. I probably did if it was there, maybe, but I signed up on the clipboard, and I must have not just included my my email address, which I think is pretty standard, but I must have included my phone number because I, in follow-up, got an email and an email invitation to like come to the next node meeting, the following one. But I also received, I believe it might have been a phone call, like individually from one of the node members, and they left me a voicemail that was very kind. That was just a, you know, hey, we're excited that you know, showed interest in our group. And at the time, I wasn't able to go to that first node meeting. I was traveling for work the day of the meeting. I was like, I'm not going to be able to make it, you know, thank you. And they didn't necessarily give up. Like, you know, like they continued to, you know, say, oh, we'd love to have you at the next one. And like I got another email, and it wasn't, you know, like I still continued to have some outreach, even though I wasn't able to make that very first meeting after I'd signed up, which I think really helped me commit to actually going to, you know, meetings and continuing to go to meetings after the fact. So even if I was only meeting people virtually in the very beginning, you know, now we do sort of do like a hybrid model. So you know, there's multiple ways for people to like attend, which I think is good. But at the time, that personalized outreach, like we talked about, was definitely, I think, a key factor in me actually coming to a meeting. Because I think it's one thing to put my name on the clipboard and another thing to actively choose to go. So that I think is my spiel about my onboarding experience. So, Mike, are we gonna go down the list, the tentative list? You can go Sarah and then Meadow. All right, then I'm gonna hand it off to Sarah.
Sounds good. So as my name is Sarah, and as I said, I'm with the Greater Lowell node. And it's been about 3 years ago I joined. I think my experience is a little bit different than Marissa's. I did not actually see 350 like at a table or at an event or anything like that. My background, I'm originally from the state of Georgia. And so my background is actually like organizing within the Democratic Party, and I've held like a number of positions within the Democrats down in that state. And I moved up here a couple of years ago to Massachusetts. And the structure of the Democratic Party from state to state is very different. So for me, it wasn't necessarily the best fit as far as organizing. And I kind of decided at one point that I was really passionate about climate. That was like my number one priority. So I think I was just searching on the web for kind of what are the organizations that are local, that do things with climate. And so then I found out about 350, and I found out there was a node in Lowell, and I found out where they met, and I somehow figured it out, and I just showed up one day. And we also do a hybrid model, so there were 2 people in the room, and that was it, because this was 2022. The membership numbers were still really down from COVID disrupting everything with organizing and organizations. And then I've been with them ever since, because I think I was very determined. And you know, a lot of people are not going to necessarily do the same thing that I did. I think there's a lot of probably more people like Marissa that just, you know, saw that at a table, and then they got called a couple of times and encouraged. But it's, so I could definitely like appreciate like those strategies in organizing, and strategies within, you know, how do we recruit people and maintain and keep people. And I definitely like think, you know, I was very determined, but definitely when I was first with Greater Lowell, and it's, you know, sometimes we only had like 4 people at a meeting because it was, you know, because it was just the organizing numbers just such a hit during the pandemic. And they just got into all these acronyms, and I was like, I don't even E4L, what are you talking about this? What are you talking about that? I don't know. but I think, we've been able to grow actually over the past couple of years, but definitely hitting higher numbers of attendance and more engagement. So I hope that we've kind of like helped a little bit as far as like ease of bringing people in and not necessarily bombarding them with so many acronyms in a meeting. So that's kind of the long and the short of it. So I'll take it to Meadow.
Sweet. Yeah, so I also like had a very pleasant experience getting onboarded, but it was a little hiccupy at first. A friend of a friend is involved in 350 Mass and like was sending around the like Make Polluters Pay petition. And so my friend was like, hey, you said when you moved to Boston you wanted to do climate stuff. Here's a petition you can sign. And I was like, rad, cool. Signed the petition, signed up for the mailing list, looked on the website for like meetings I could join. Didn't try that hard, but like looked for meetings I could join. The Boston node wasn't active at the time, so I like went to one meeting, but it was just like an empty Zoom room. So then I was like, well, that was a bust. But I was still on the mailing list, but wasn't really doing much. And then after the 2024 election, there was a big Zoom like new member sort of orientation Zoom meeting. It was very helpful. I went to, got a lot of information, kind of understood what 350 Mass did better. And then after that, Dan reached out to me and we had a very like helpful for me one-on-one meeting with like the personalization stuff that Isaac was talking about, and like really helped me figure out like how I could get involved personally, and connected me with the Boston node like when it kind of came back. I don't remember exactly how it happened, but somehow John Grossman reached out to me about the science working group, and so then I got involved in both the Boston node and the science working group, and everybody in both of those groups was super wonderful, super welcoming, super aware that I was new, and so very like down to explain things to me and how things worked without like I being like condescending about it. And so then have had, I mean, I'm obviously still pretty new, but my experiences thus far after I started going to those meetings have been great.
Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing. Also, yeah, just I feel like best way to organize is to make friends. That's, I feel like, my takeaway has been. Really quick, do we want like maybe one or two folks to also share how they got into 350 Mass? If anyone else feels like they have, if any of that resonated with you, or you have a story a little bit different that you would want to share about how you got involved. Yeah, Eric.
Share, because okay, apparently I walked into the wrong meeting because I thought this was an onboarding meeting, but it's a meeting about onboarding. But yeah, I met Lee, who I think works for you guys. She's involved somehow, and I met her at a New Year's Eve party, and she talked about how she was into environmentalism and a community organizer, and I related to both of those things. And I've been looking for, I really think the climate crisis is like the #1 problem facing humanity, but I haven't found an organization like that I was able to join. So I have high hopes for this one because Lee seemed pretty cool, and I'm coming from a background on, I helped start the Davis Square Neighborhood Council this past year. So I didn't think organizing was a thing I could do, but I guess it's something I can do. So that's where I am.
Oh, awesome. Wow. That's a crazy story, but I'm glad to see you here. Yeah, we'll definitely connect further. But thank you for sharing. Well, yeah. Anyone can organize. Yes, Steve, and then Martine, maybe.
Yes, okay. So I don't know how I got the email in my mailbox, but it was a note saying that there was a Make the Polluter Pay resolution to be voted in Cambridge. So I went to that, and Dan and Evan were there, and people from the Watertown node, and they were very welcoming. So I was aware of 350 because a colleague of mine at Bondi, Sabine, was very active in it. So that gave me a little push to check the Cambridge Somerville node. I have to say, on May Day, Dan, I bumped into Dan, who asked me to carry the Make the Polluter Pay banner, and that really gets people attention. You know, many people came to ask me what it was or ask to take pictures. So I think, I don't know, through that, it will be a good way of maybe recruiting people, because who just said she was interested in that? I'm terrible with names, and I have many people in front of me on the screen right now. So that's how I got to it.
You for sharing, Stephen.
Yeah. I was totally self-motivated. I wanted to join a climate organization, so I just Googled climate organizations near me. And 350 popped up, and I went to the first meeting, my first meeting, and there was a group of about 10 people there. And I thought, these are my people. I love this group. I still do. So that's why I got involved. And then after the first meeting, we went to some actions. Like the big one was the People's Climate March in New York City. When was that? Was that 2008 or something? Or when was that? I forget. Anyway, and so then I didn't really do a whole lot until I retired, and now I have a lot more time, so I participate more.
I think that was 2014, Steve.
2014, okay. Not as long back as I thought. Very good.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I feel like, yeah, another point on the, people are looking for us. So how do we make ourselves visible? And, how do we make it easy for people to find, easy for people to join once they've found? Cool. So maybe we'll transition now into, we already transitioned a little bit, but into more of a group discussion. Yeah. So I think these are a lot of, good points being brought up. But yeah, just starting to think about like how we can start to use our experiences to facilitate other people's being brought in a little bit more. So to kick us off, I have a couple questions to think about together. So yeah, the first topic that I thought we could talk about, which moving a little bit chronologically, but so you've got someone in your grasp, you've got them to come to a meeting, and somebody new is at your meeting. You've done a one-on-one, you've done the outreach thing, you've gotten them to come to your meeting, you've gotten them to come to your event. So now, what do you do with that person? So maybe one first question to think about is, if you remember, like what the first role that you had within 350 was, or the first task that you did. Like maybe you came to your first meeting and there was a rally the next day, and so you went to an art build and you made a sign, and you helped carry all the signs to the action, as just an example. So yeah, just like what was something that was easy for you to just get tapped into right off the bat as a new member? And I'll open the floor up so you can kick us off. Yeah.
I can, I guess, say something. I know it was probably a little bit before I actually did anything that was like outside of the node, but it was probably, I know that the Greater Franklin node tables at like one of the local farmers markets. So I think that might have been one of the first things. It was either that or potentially phone banking for like the fair share amendment was something I did, I think, pretty early in. Which I wouldn't have known about without like 350, but that was, it made it easy to like sign up for a time to kind of do that and help out a cause that was, related to what we were asking for, but just doing something rather than just attending meetings, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like tabling, we heard that once already today too. It's a great way to just get someone newer and someone who's been around for a minute and go together. You can do a one-on-one while you're tabling. Yeah, it works very well. Yeah, Carol.
Now that we're having active legislative meetings, that has often been a way to get people who were kind of on the outside a little more involved, a little more engaged, and they don't necessarily have to say anything, but at least they're there, they're a constituent, they're advocating for the things that we're advocating for, and so we've done that. And Marissa and another member in our node just last week they've had 2 legislative meetings that they've actually set up. So you can move to that at some point.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Like, you can start someone out when they're just, getting involved and like going to these meetings to a point where they're like setting up the meetings. That's awesome. That's exactly what we want to see. Cool. Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, I think, and going back to the original question, or just at least the first question, was the first thing that that I did as part of the node that was actually like an actual activity rather than just attending a meeting. And yes, I think tabling is like probably the easiest action that anyone could take, especially like with our node. Like people are already setting that up and you just have to show up and kind of just get used to the organization. And it's a really good like entry level way into any sort of organizing. But I think that's what's important, at least with the node that I'm in, and really should be with any nodes for people who who are leaders of the nodes, is that you might have to ask people to do certain things, not immediately, like right when they, hey, you want to volunteer for this, like immediately, but as they kind of get used to the organization. So for example, like, so I sit on the statewide steering team. The reason I sit on the statewide steering team is because I was asked if I wanted to do that. Because we had 2 reps that had kind of been doing it for a long time, and they wanted to try to pass the baton a little bit. And so, unfortunately, the other rep who was new ended up having some health problems and wasn't able to continue. So we only replaced 1 rep instead of 2, but that's okay. But we we get to if you ask people to take on new roles, or maybe ask them to help manage your social media page, or ask them to do this or that, and then they get more comfortable. And so I can say for myself, that I've taken more of an active role in the past year and a half or so, that I didn't take at the very beginning of my time at 350. And that's really been rewarding for me, and it's been able to help build the organization, as well as other people who have taken on more active roles that have joined since then. It's just made our organization more dynamic, especially now, since the numbers are kind of picking up as far as interest in activism, interest in organizing, given the new political climate, given the fact that the pandemic's over. We really need to be available and ready to meet people where they are, bring them in, and then eventually give them things to do so they feel included and they feel like they're contributing.
Yeah, I feel like, on that, like, just making sure that people have outlets and like ways to, you're providing them with constantly, like, oh, there's this event that we have a group going to, or like, it doesn't have to just be like, oh, like there's this like thing that we are organizing. I feel like I'm a huge proponent of, like, I don't know, again, on the point of being friends with people, like, you're like, oh, I'm gonna go like to this big rally that's like, maybe not super related, like I'll go to this May Day rally. Or just like something that like an ally is organizing. And like, just inviting new people to that is like an incredible way to spend some time with people and make them feel, like a part of the group. But then also, get to start talking about some of the stuff that, like, some of the more political questions, which I feel like are important to cover too. Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that one thing that made me feel like 350 was really a good organization for me was I began to feel that my efforts were really effective after I got involved in lobbying days. I got to know my state rep really well, and my state senator, and had many conversations with them, and I felt like that was very fruitful, and it was something really worthwhile. And the uh, the major actions, the demonstrations, and so forth were great for the soul, but I'm not sure what they did to actually move the needle on the climate. But participating in lobby days and talking to my rep and senator, I think was something that made me feel like 350 was really a worthwhile organization and helped me be effective in doing something constructive about the climate.
Yeah, I feel like another big theme that I'm hearing, at least, is like, so many people are like actively looking for something to do, and like, Googling like, please, like, what's the climate org near me, please, like, let me do something. And so, and people know about Make Polluters Pay, people know about these campaigns. And so like, yeah, it's important to make sure that we're like, yeah, offering people an outlet to both, feel good and go to these actions, and, walk away from it feeling like, there's people around me who feel the same things that I do and want the same things I do. But also giving them a way to, actually, yeah, make the change that they want to see, in the best way that we can, at least. Yeah, Carolyn.
Another thing that has been helpful that I remember inviting Marissa and others to was the statewide meetings that we have. We have our summits occasionally, usually about once a year. And it's a great way to get to know other people across the state and to find out there are people out there across the whole state that are doing the same, similar stuff to you. And it's, I think a statewide organization is really useful because it is big enough that you can really get some good stuff done that really will make a real difference. But it's also small enough that you get to know people across the whole state much more, much more intimately than you would otherwise.
I feel like the 350 mass specific, setup of nodes and having like these, working groups that are across nodes, but then having the node structure for people to latch onto. Yeah, I feel like that's super strong. And so utilizing that in a way to introduce people to, like Meadow, we were talking earlier about like joining the science group and stuff like that, where there are like specific places for people with specific interests who are coming in like, oh, I want to work on, legislation. That's like my thing. That's what I want to do. So then making sure that there are, there's like a working group to direct people towards where they can, work with other people who also feel that strong, pull to do that sort of work. Yeah, that's super strong. Okay, so I think maybe now we'll move into talking about some of the barriers, because I think, we can all see how, people are engaged and people, want to be active, and we want to bring people in. But, there are some things that, are barriers to that. So I just wanted to open the floor a little bit to start talking about some barriers to engagement that people have faced. So maybe first we can talk about anything individually that people have dealt with, whether in 350 Mass or not. It can be in another organizing space. It can be in, a job that you had. It can be in, a social setting. I don't know, it can be anything, but just some sort of like group of people. What are some of the barriers that you've faced when trying to get more involved? So one of the ones that we heard earlier was like transport, like especially now that meetings are in person a lot of the times, like being able to make it to a meeting can be a barrier. And like, physical proximity to a barrier. Some people may not be close enough to one of our nodes, which is why they spring up. But so like, yeah, any other barriers that people can think of or that you've experienced? Yeah. So,
I think sometimes on a similar vein, some of the for like the activities in terms of getting involved sometimes can be like scheduling. I know like especially when I really first joined, as someone who works like a fairly standard job, a lot of the times the asks to like do things, particularly on the legislative side, are things that like unless I'm taking time off of work, which could happen occasionally, but you know, like unless like a lot of that happens while I do have a job that I have to go do. So I know that that's potentially another obstacle for some of the more not node, usually not an issue for like node meetings for my node, but like for some of the asks for involvement, that can be sometimes a barrier to saying yes, I guess, to an experience like that. So just sort of like a scheduling thing, I guess.
I would love to poke your brain just a little bit about like, I feel like that's such a big issue too, of scheduling, especially when people, you know, have commitments that you can't just drop your job. So like if we are trying to reach people who are, you know, actively working, have you had any success or has anyone else had any success reaching out to folks who, um, you know, have a working schedule and might not be as able to join meetings and stuff like that? This can also be just like something else to think about. But yeah, I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that. Martine.
A bit of a different issue. We've had quite a few people who come once and don't come back. And if I speak about my personal experience, at the beginning, it's a little overwhelming. You hear a lot of things, you're not sure what's going on. Like, you know, in Cambridge, I heard Meadow, for example. I had no idea what that was. So maybe it would be nice to spend more time at the end of a meeting explaining what went on during the meeting, because I think it can be intimidating for people if they don't understand what's going on in the meeting. I don't know if my case is particular or if many people feel like that at the beginning. And maybe have also some kind of mentoring system. I don't know if other people had the same experience at the beginning. At the first few meetings, I thought, oh, okay. Or people would mention Marjorie Baker. I thought, okay, who is Marjorie Baker? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely a shared experience. I feel like that's like, yeah, going to a meeting can be so intimidating. And then, you know, when you go to a meeting when it's a bunch of people who know each other and who have been, you know, organizing for some amount of time together, and you're just like, wow, that was a lot. So yeah, definitely important to think about it. Yeah, Paul, you've frozen up a little bit. Are you still there?
Oh,
Nope. Maybe we'll come back to Paul in a second. Sarah, do you want to go?
Yeah, yeah, I think I do agree. It can be very overwhelming initially, especially if you got people that are really into it and they've been into it for a while and you're brand new and you're like, what is this? What is that? So I think as node leaders or as leaders in the organization, it's really important that we structure meetings efficiently and effectively. I know that in Lowell, we're doing so many different things. Sometimes it's like, oh, you got to cut some of the stuff from the agenda. We don't have time to talk about all of this in detail in one meeting. We got to keep it, you know, KISS, you know, keep it simple. Won't say the last word, right? Just and that's tough when you get really if you get really into it and you really want to solve all these problems. Like it's difficult. It's not easy. So I think everybody, like when I first joined, was like really kind to me and really just really nice, and I think that's really important. But it's also, you know, they have to, yeah, keep it simple, silly. I like that. But yeah, so we have to kind of bridge that gap as far with knowledge to not overwhelm the person, and it takes a lot of discipline and meeting running a meeting, and it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of planning. The other thing I would say, and I don't know if I'll discuss it too much here because we are running short on time, but one of the things that's particular for my node is because we're in a gateway city is language barriers. We do a lot to connect with the Cambodian community, Spanish speaking community, Portuguese speaking community. And none of us really speak any of those languages, so it's a lot of relationship building, but that doesn't necessarily translate into new members. So that's something that we're trying to work on. But it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street, right? We don't want to just have members. We want to really engage, collaboratively with these organizations and get people who really want to join the resources and the information. So I don't know if anyone has strategies for that, but that's something that we're working on.
Yeah, that's a huge one. All right, maybe we'll do Meadow and then Karen and then Paul. So good.
I mean, I think sort of a related thing to the jargon is like knowing the people. I feel like there's a lot of discussion where like the people who've been doing it for a long time, like know all of the relevant political figures, which is a twofold issue in terms, and I don't really know the way to solve it. Like this is a natural occurrence. Of course, the people who've been doing it for a while know more people. And then when it comes time to talk about, oh, what are we going to do? Of course, the people who already know everybody are going to reach out to the people they already know. That's a more natural and effective connection. But then sometimes it's a little harder for me to figure out like, how can I, step up that ladder of involvement because I'd like to. But a lot of what at least my node is doing is talking to people and networking, which is great, but I'm not best suited for that. So I think that's a barrier to further engagement, but not necessarily initial engagement. Another thing that I don't know what to do about, but I went to an event that I was tabling at this weekend, and I went with a friend, and the friend mentioned that like she wanted to get more involved, but she's an Indian immigrant and was nervous around an organization that was clearly largely older white folks. And I can be like, they're chill, but like I'm also a white person, so I like my assurances don't mean a lot to her, and then that's like a self-perpetuating problem because then you don't have as many people of color joining, and then it seems scarier, and I don't know what you do about that, but that's another barrier I've noticed. Or I've heard one singular person tell me about.
Karen, what's your hand up?
Are you trying to connect Paul?
Oh no, do you want to go first
Oh.
and then we'll get Paul after?
Sure, I'll go. Back in 2023, or 2013, when I joined 350 Mass and started a node, I thought, well, I need to know what's going on here. And so we went to the Cambridge node. And at that time, I don't know if they still do this, but they had orientations that preceded the actual general meeting. And I thought that was helpful. And I'm not sure if they're still doing that, but it's something to consider that if you have enough people to just automatically hold a preceding meeting, then that would work.
Yeah, I feel like really briefly, one of the like one way of like maintaining people that I've seen work really well in spaces that I've been in has been like the buddy system, which is so simple, but just like having a new member, and you have one person who's in the group who is that person's point of contact, and you just like that person will email them, that person will text them, maybe nothing will come of it, that person will call them, maybe they'll be like, I don't want anything to do with you, but having one person there, and then if that person wants to come to a meeting, great, I'll come to the meeting with you. Do you want to like catch the red line together or something like that? It's like just an easy way to make someone feel much more comfortable. Yeah. Paul, do you want to go really quick?
Yeah, thanks. How's my audio now?
You're great.
Good.
Adequate. Okay. Well, going back a few comments, I thought I heard you suggest, Isaac, and if not, this is a new idea, which is helpful to me, that when you don't have something coming up for a new person to do, you could just say, well, let's go table at this farmer's market that I wasn't planning a tabling at, but now I've got a reason to go do it, which is a brain opener for me. And I thought of another one, which is, okay, let's just schedule a Zoom call with your rep. And also that's a possible answer to the good question about what about people who have work during the day? You know, if you schedule a Zoom call with a rep, and it could be a bigger one, with enough, well, like a week advance notice, some people are willing to take 45 minutes out of their day for a Zoom call. But I don't know, like people here who are still working, are retired, how does that strike you? If you had a week notice, how available do you think it would depend on your workday, right? Anybody have any reactions to that?
Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, hi all, Dan. I'm the legislative manager with 350 Mass. I do want to say that we very regularly have our legislative meetings during the day to cater to legislators, because that's when they're working. But a big part of our power as constituents and as a movement is having the legislators come to us. So I would be very curious to see what it looks like to have more meetings on nights, on weekends, and make the legislators work for us at a time that's convenient for all of our members, not just catering to what's convenient for them.
Could you say more about what you mean by come to us?
Yeah, meeting at a time that's not their regular working hours when they're in their office in the State House.
Oh, right. Ask them, can they do a Zoom or a constituent meeting in the evening? Yeah, never thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's our power. They got to do it. Nina, do you want to go really quick? And then I want to close.
Yeah, I wanted to speak quickly to two things. One is we've been talking about onboarding of individuals to sort of already existing nodes. And I just wanted to say that the Waltham node, I don't know if it existed in the past, but it's rebuilding if that's the case, or it's forming. And Sabina von Mering, who is a longtime 350 person, isn't, has a node that she's been in for a long time, but she's been coming to the initial meetings, and that's been incredibly helpful to us. So that's one thing. And then one of the reasons I haven't been active in 350 is that I'm active on climate stuff through my union. And I want to speak to the issue of the legislators coming to us, to 350, because we certainly do that at the union through our Committee on Political Education, which is basically a PAC, and they're happy to come and talk to us, partly because we endorse and but if you're lobbying for things and they know that you're lobbying for things, then they should be willing to come and talk about what the legislation is, and especially say somebody like Mike Barrett, who's really active on climate, have him come and talk about the things that he's interested in, and then 350 can talk about make polluters pay.
Yeah, it's all super. Yeah, I feel like the legislators can definitely come to us. I feel like they should be doing that, absolutely. I want to, yeah, we're running a little bit low on time, so just one thing that I wanted to do right before we close, because I know we were talking about barriers, but I feel like it's, it'll be super nice to think about just what we can do moving forward. So everyone individually, and we don't have to like share any of this at all, but just like thinking about how you're going to bring this back to your node and to your communities. Any of these tactics that we've talked about, any of these barriers that you want to think more through with your own groups. Just think about those. And then also maybe just thinking about one person that you would want to reach out to. So maybe you have somebody in mind that, oh, this person's been to a few meetings, but I'd love to have them be engaged a little bit more. Let me reach out to them and we'll get a coffee or something like that. Or it can be, I really need some assistance with something. So I'm going to reach out to somebody, to my node leader, or to, you know, somebody on staff or something to get some assistance on this project that I've been thinking about. Yeah, it can be anything, but just to start thinking about next steps as we're trying to, yeah, get tabling and get recruiting. So yeah, that's all I have. Thanks everyone for being here. I'll hang out for a second.